Actuator support for Redis dependent on Spring data. Actuator support for Elasticsearch. Endpoint support. Annotation support for actuator endpoints. Interfaces and classes relating to invoking operation methods. Converter support for actuator endpoints. Endpoint reflection support. Caching support for actuator endpoints. Jackson support. Classes for actuator endpoints, JMX support for actuator endpoints, annotation support for actuator JMX endpoints, web support for actuator endpoints, annotation support for actuator web endpoints, Jersey support for actuator endpoints, Spring WebFlux support for actuator endpoints, Spring MVC support for actuator endpoints, actuator support for Spring Frameworks environment, actuator support for Flyway, actuator support for Hazelcast, actuator health